Hi, everybody. Welcome to our artist talk. I'm excited that you're all here with us, and I'm excited to explore all the creative processes that the artists are going to share with us today. So, welcome to the third artist talk in a series featuring artists from Pink Progression Collaborations exhibit on view at the Arvada Center through November 8th. My name is Anna Kay. I'm a local artist and I help to organize the exhibition. This show incorporates a fusion of narratives through collaborative artwork. These multidimensional works emphasize the collective issues that confront us and the transformational ways of finding common ground. 100 years ago, the 19th Amendment guaranteeing and protecting women's right to vote was ratified. This historic centennial offers us the opportunity to commemorate a milestone, recognize the consecutive dates in which all women attain the right to vote in America, and explore the complex struggle for universal suffrage today. Check out the work in person by making your free reservations to see the exhibit at the Arvada Center website. The exhibition is underwritten by Nancy Terry and Jody Steves. A special thank you to our lead curator, exhibition manager, Emily Grace King. Thank you for being here with us today. And to Colin Parson, Director of Galleries and the Arvada Center staff. Today, we are going to discover the fascinating, collaborative, and creative processes of amazing artists who are working in our local community. We are going to begin with Trine Bumiller and Kathryn Winograd. Trine Bumiller is known for her paintings of the natural world. She is represented by Robichon Gallery in Denver and ZG Gallery in Chicago. Kathryn Winograd is an award-winning poet and writer, as well as a teacher at Regis University's MFA program.
Well, I think Trine and we kind of feel like we had an edge when we started this, because Trine and I was adding up the years, we met 27 years ago at the Rocky Women's Institute and did some collaborations there. And so it just seemed when Trine wrote me about this collaboration, it just seemed so natural to do this with her. And it was for us, very painless, very much in sync. And so for me, it's been really a wonderful process. Trine, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I didn't know who I would collaborate with. I wanted to be part of the show, and I was trying to rack my brain thinking about what I could do with another artist. And then when I heard that some people were collaborating with writers, I immediately thought of you and thought, what a perfect solution, because I feel like our work is very much in sync with each other. We've known each other for a long time, and we've actually collaborated on small projects in the past. So it was, it seemed very easy to me. I mean, it also seemed like a very long process that we extended out over a year, but it always felt like it was very fluid and organic the whole time. That's us with our masks on at the first day of the exhibition.
So Trine and I are both from Ohio, and we didn't know each other till we came here and met at the Rocky Women's Institute. And
Rocky Mountain Women's Institute?
Yes, and so it turns out that we both worked at Kings Island, which was an amusement park, and did face drawing. I quit after 2 weeks, and Trine became an artist. So there's a little difference in our experience. But when we met at the Rocky Women's Institute, we got involved in doing a little book of children's poems. One thing that Trine and I share is a real love of nature, and I think we spend a lot of our times outdoor looking at nature. So it just became a very fun collaboration doing this little book, and Trina's little prints that she did were fabulous. We never got the book published. I know I published the poems in a lot of children's magazines and nature magazines, but never found a publisher. It was such a fun project to do.
At the time, we both had very young children. I had a daughter that was about 4 years old, and then a newborn baby. Kathy had 2 twin girls that were actually right in between the ages of my 2 girls. And so the idea of being at the Rocky Mountain Women's Institute and having a room of our own, a studio, and a stipend to work was really, really important to at least to my career at the time, because it really felt like I was being honored as a woman, as an artist. And so the idea of doing a children's book just seemed to come naturally. What I think is very funny is that we made it in this very somber, very serious poems and very somber shades of black and gray, which might be why we never found a publisher for it.
So then it seemed pretty natural. I did a book of poetry, Aaron to Breath, and I asked Trine if she would do the cover for it. And she did this beautiful cover that I treasure, and I have up on my wall, as a matter of fact. And you can see kind of the Trina's signature, I think. I mean, just that the beautiful shapes that she had, natural shapes, and then that kind of triptych feel of the, she's going to say it better than me, but how those horizontal spaces go, which is
well, it's the idea of, I think what I love about Kathy's work is her poetry is very much in sync with the natural world, but she does break it down into different elements. And that's how I see my own work, breaking down the perspective as to, the microcosm, the macrocosm, different elements of the earth, whether it's water, plant life, or the atmosphere. So we did meet. We talked a lot on the internet. We exchanged emails, and then we finally met at a coffee shop. And I remember this was right before the pandemic happened, and we were both kind of talking about it, but we were still, meeting in person, and we spread out all of our stuff over the coffee table and just really started to break things down. I was looking at her poems. I was coming up with images. You can see some of my photocopies there, lots of notes.
Yes. And I think I kind of started the process because there was some images that I've been working with. And I think if you turn to the next, I don't know if it's going to show up, but well, I'll kind of, so there were some images I was playing with. And for me, when I started thinking about the pink progression, I really was thinking about how much power there is in women doing art. And that even when we begin that art in darkness, our work in darkness, there's such a brightness and a beauty in sort of the artifacts that we come up with. And so I sent Trine a little, some of the images I had been working on, and it was about a woman writing and a woman painting. And that kind of got us started, I think, with some of the themes that we had in our collaboration.
Yeah, and these are just these are actually my notes, where whenever I start a project, I'm gathering information, I'm doing research. And so it was really fun to have a lot of the information come from Kathy's own poems. So you can see I'm actually like circling things and scratching things out and making lists, and then incorporating my own imagery from both things that I had in the past and then things I was looking for.
I have been doing workshops and been in workshops and teaching workshops since I was 21, and I've never had such an intensive analysis of my work in my life. So that was really shocking and incredible when she showed me all those notes that she was doing.
And this is just a preliminary sketch, and this actually ended up being pretty close to the final paintings. So after, sorting through all that stuff, I kind of narrow it down. I actually eliminate a lot of things and just bring things down to the essence, which I think is what poetry is about. I think, painting and poetry have so much in common, but I love how poetry really just lays bare that crystallization of an idea and just brings in different images. So I like to, do the same thing with my paintings. So you can see kind of my notes here in the beginning of the paintings.
I think we were really in sync, because I felt like the images that she ended up sketching out really so parallel what I felt were like the important images in my poem. And so in Memory is Redundant, which is a quote from Terry Tempest Williams, there's the image I have of outside a lighted window, a woman writing, a woman painting, one snowflake wedged in blue pine, one leaf falling, the moon is dropping a kind of love. And that pine tree with the snowflakes is what Trine picked up on. And so it was really exciting to me to see that poem become visualized in Trine's eyes. So this one is Ars Poetica, and I'll start out. So again, I just was so interested in the thought of all these women. We were in solitary confinement, basically, all of us out there working, trying to express our feelings about this movement and the times. And I was so interested in the process of the art. And this was a poem I did called Ars Poetica. And I knew Trine would like this. And so, because it has a wonderful quote from Van Gogh, which says, I long so much to do landscape. In trees, for instance, I see expression and a soul. And it reminded me of Trine's work so much. And I sent her this poem, and she wrote me back right away and said, oh my God, I love it. And I knew she would because of that, and because there was grasshoppers, it was about Ohio, there was chicory, there was all these things that she and I had grown up with. And she really grabbed onto that.
Yeah, one thing about Ohio is the plant life is kind of out of control there. It's so humid and so warm, and things grow like the jungle there. And I have very distinct memories of walking down, old roads in Ohio where the weeds are growing out of control and seeing chicory. It's just a weed there. And so I picked up on that. It has, medicinal qualities. I picked up on the idea of this, this rain, this sort of structural movement outside the window, and the screen of the chicory kind of balancing through that, seeing different layers of things.
As a poet, I see my poems on tiny little pages and tiny little journals, right? And so it was freaking me out to think about my poems on this big wall. And so I knew it was important to me to really try to find work and to create work that had a lot of white space in it, and that had a kind of form to it. And the poem before Ars Poetica is called a haibun, and it is a piece of prose. And at the end, you do a kind of haiku, which I did a little bit more than a haiku. But I loved, because of Trine, really looking at her work made me think about the form and structure of my poems on that canvas.
And that's why we chose that vertical format. I remembered seeing Kathy's poems and seeing that vertical, and we wanted it to have actually a book-like quality to it, to do two sides of a page practically, but large and on the wall.
This one was an interesting one for me. This was a poem about a young girl who had been in high school, who I knew some things happened, and she showed up at my house up in the cabin wanting a shower very badly. And I didn't realize at the time that she actually had become pregnant the night before. And so, I wrote the poem, and originally it started with how I ended, about being still, mossy, dark, earth wet. But I realized that it really, the emphasis of the poem, of the experience, because it all turned out well for her, was really this idea of this feminine fecundity, this connection with the earth. And it was going back again to nature and the elements, and women's connection with it, even in face of what could have been a really terrible experience. It became actually for her a really wonderful thing finally. Trine?
And I chose to focus on this daylily shape. I love the sharp edges, the spiky fronds. It had this sort of explosion of passion feeling to it. But daylilies that are usually, lilies which are often white and pure, I made it red and kind of almost violent in a way. And then these bees floating through that kind of give it a little sort of a sinister quality, but there is this beautiful color, light that and life that comes through in Kathy's poem that I wanted to express with the really vibrant colors and the sort of that burst from within, expressing this life form that is both terrifying and then also very wonderful.
Again, I think she surprised me because as she talks about how she changed the colors of those lilies, I mean, it's like flipping, reality for the abstract. And it was the same with the poem. I mean, I often find myself taking a poem and turning it completely upside down. And I think part of it is because we want poems to end with a big epiphany, and yet sometimes it's better if they end with something small, something tender. And often we begin our poems in a tender way, and so it ends up also taking out narrative meaning, and you allow sort of the images and words to begin to work with each other and maybe create feeling and emotion that you might not have realized yourself when you're first writing the poem. So it was neat to see Trine changing the color scheme of these lilies that she did. So I know Trine and I are just in sync, It was a very easy, pleasurable collaboration, to be honest. And it was wonderful seeing them up on the wall. That was exciting. I've never had anything in a gallery before. And I remember I was like, I had to run to a sign shop. I was like, what is going on? It was just really exciting. So
yeah, there are a lot of those sort of weird practical considerations of the actual physicality of making art that I think Kathy was sort of a little bit overwhelmed with, but we were able to help each other through that. This is the beautiful image by Wes Magyar of the work in the show. You can see this nice sort of a triptych format that we were, very much intent about having it look good on the wall. And then the last slide, you can see how it looks in the gallery. They're quite large, actually, but I think they work well in the context of all the other work. Let me just end by saying thank you to Anna, thank you to Emily, thank you to Colin and the Arvada Center, and of course, Kathryn. This was a lovely, lovely show to be part of, and the work is so passionate and strong, and we both feel really honored to be part of it.
Trine and I came the very first morning, the very first half hour that we did. Opened.
9 o'clock.
So exciting to see all the women's work. That was just so powerful. I just was so honored to be part of it. So thank you as well.
Well, we're very honored that you are a part of it as well. And the series of paintings and poems bring with it a history that you have shared together in motherhood, creativity, place, and more. And I love how the paintings capture the essence of the poetry, and the poetry captures the essence of the paintings. Thank you so much for sharing your creative processes with us. Deidre Adams is known for her textiles and paintings. She is represented by Walker Fine Art in Denver. Brooke Atherton is a multimedia artist who lives and works in Billings, Montana, and is represented by Toucan Gallery in Billings, Montana. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
As Anna mentioned, Brooke and I live about 600 miles apart from each other, so we had a little bit of a challenge trying to figure out how to do this collaboration. Let me back up a little bit. The reason I chose Brooke is because she and I are both textile artists, and we belong to the same organization. It's called Studio Art Quilt Associates, and they do support for people who do art in the quilt medium. And so I became aware of her work in different shows that we were both in. This is their website. It's saqa.com. And this work on the left is Brooke's, and I believe, if I remember correctly, it was the first work I ever saw of hers in a show, and I was just blown away by how cool it was. And then I kind of followed her work through the catalogs of the different exhibitions. She does a lot of very detailed work. She stitches objects and artifacts onto textile materials in a very interesting way with landscapes. She could not be here tonight because she is putting the finishing touches on a very major show that she is having at the Yellowstone Art Museum. The show is called Mothers and Daughters. It explores maternal, marital, and sisterly relationships. The large-scale installation features new work using her mother's antique satin wedding dress, a collaborative series based on trees, and a freestanding installation repurposed from an army tent. Many of her works relate to specific stories and events with underlying themes of overlapping histories and passages through time and space. By stitching together meaningful fabrics with found materials, maps, calendars, and measuring devices, she creates loose narratives linking geography, gender, memory, history, and craft. And this is the wedding dress. It's a huge piece. This is in progress. It's now up on the wall, but it was a very major undertaking. And this is one of my works, just to give you an idea of what I do. So we both have a theme of archaeology that we kind of address in our work. This is made by stitching layers and layers of paper and then kind of picking back through it to see what's under there, in a kind of reverse process. And this is another one where I've combined quilts with that same technique. So mostly textile work. this is one of Brooke's. So one of the themes that we are both interested in is we're drawn to objects with a history, things like old books, maps, quilts. We just have stacks and stacks of books and paper that we like to repurpose into new work. Here's another one of Brooke's. And this is one of mine. This is an old quilt that was full of holes that I repurposed into a new piece called Connections. And that's a close-up of it. Another theme that we both kind of work with a lot is used tea bags. We both enjoy the process of saving tea bags and emptying out the contents because the used bags are just so compelling. They have this kind of almost rust-like, they feel historical to me. And this is one of mine that uses tea bags. And this you probably already saw a little bit from Trine's presentation, but this is ours together. What we decided on for the format was to do individual panels. And part of the problem we had was Brooke is very organized and she wanted to get on this and just be done because she had this massive show coming up that she had to get ready for. And I'm kind of a procrastinator. I wait until it's like really pressure before I start working. And what happened at the end of the year, I fell down some stairs and broke my wrist. So I was completely unable to use my left hand, which is my dominant hand. So I had to learn how to paint with my right hand. Anyway, so our work is kind of different. Hers are in 3 sets. Oh, the other thing that happened was she, during COVID time, was looking for something to do to keep busy. And so she made these little log cabin blocks. It's a traditional quilt block out of tea bags. And I don't know if you can appreciate the intense finickiness of trying to do this with little tiny pieces of tea bag and hand stitching them. But then she sent me a set. And so each of our works has this tie-in of the log cabin block. So let's see, this is the first set of hers. And so this one is based on a cookbook. I'm gonna read you an anecdote that she sent me about this. While cookbooks usually are tied to family kitchens and meals, this one from Atlanta, dated about 1906 to 1908, was given to me by the elderly director of the Museum of Natural History in Dayton, Ohio, whose divorced mother relied on the recipes in it to support the 2 of them after she left her abusive husband. He gave it to me when I opened my own restaurant nearly half a century after she baked her last caramel nut angel food cake. It was what she was asked for most often, and that recipe was never shared with anyone else. To be clear, I have never been in an abusive relationship, although I was chased around a desk once. Food as a means of escape, as a means of support, and creating a support group. So I wanted to read this one little detail from the cookbook. How to prepare a husband. A good many husbands are utterly spoiled in the cooking. Some women set them constantly in hot water, others let them freeze by carelessness and indifference. Some keep them in a pickle all their lives. Husbands can be tender and appetizing treated in this way, but they are really delicious when properly prepared. In selecting your husband, you should not be guided by the silvery appearance as in buying mackerel, nor by the golden tint as in picking salmon. Be sure to select him yourself as tastes differ. And this is a panel where she used the entire cover of the cookbook. And you can see here also she incorporates her stitched landscapes with the little artifacts. And this set, I can't remember how many of each one, but there's several of this grouping, and this is based on a tree. Her mother had asked her to make her an artwork of a tree, and she never did. So she finally did it in this piece. And she says, I already told you about how haunted I am by a tree from my own mother. This is it. It's not what she was picturing, I'm sure, but I think she'd get it and be happy with it. And set 3 is using pages from an aunt she had that wrote a PhD dissertation. So all of her work is based on very strong relationships with female relatives that she had growing up. And this is mine. So I had a somewhat different approach to mine. every one of them is different. My original idea was I was going to take quotes from famous historical women and just make pieces out of them. And then I realized that everybody in the world is already doing that. So I had some that were that, and then I also wanted to include ordinary women's experiences. So it's a mixture of both. And I'm really interested in the human handwriting. So this is a piece of work that was from the diary of Rosa Parks. It's her memories of the march and the experiences that she had with helping to move forward with history. And this one is based on my own mother. She died in 2005, and when I was cleaning out their house, I found all kinds of things that were hers from her life. And this one includes, let's see, she's got reports that she did for college in a history class, and from earlier, some French words that she had to memorize for a test. And then later in life, she became interested in the horse races. So this little piece in the lower right corner is a list of horses and what bets she wanted to place on them. The middle part is a food preparation report from her experiences in 4-H when she was 14 years old. And she had to prepare, serve, and plan a meal. And she had to write a little questionnaire out on it. This is my favorite part. Question: have you made any changes in the way you used to set a table? Answer: I turn the knife blade toward the plate. Question: how have you improved your table manners? Answer: I try to be more cheerful at the table. This one comes from the American Prison Writing Archive. It is a collection of experiences handwritten by incarcerated persons. The mission of the American Prison Writing Archive is to replace speculation on and misrepresentation of prisons, imprisoned people, and prison workers with first-person witness by those who live and work on the receiving end of American criminal justice. This one is from some handwritten notes from Agnes Martin. She's explaining her thoughts on inspiration, which were quite unique. This is my favorite one. It's from a good friend of mine, Susan. She wrote this about an experience she had where she went to a protest when she was 16 years old. And this happened in 1962. And I'm just going to read you a tiny part of it. And just keep in mind that it was nearly 60 years ago. She says, when I think of it, I get a picture in my mind, a picture of men in blue walking through a crowd of people, my people, people I know and love. They are moving their sticks, hitting indiscriminately at whoever rests in their way. There is no hesitation in their movements. It is as if they are chopping a piece of wood and are in no particular hurry to finish. I see myself standing and crying with a friend. There was a whole crowd around me, but I felt completely alone, wanting to do something, but with no idea of what to do, completely, utterly helpless, as if my whole world were falling apart, seeing adults run by, not knowing what to do. Who should I follow? Who should I listen to? There is no one. And fright. Fright because I know not who I am with, and because I see a stick coming towards me that would be only too glad to strike at me. I remember being told that policemen are human. If they are, I am ashamed that I too am called human, for I am not like them.
Okay, thank you, Deidre. Very, beautiful, powerful words and visuals too. And this layered and stitched composition spans 14 feet across the wall. It's very large. It's large in scale and content, containing such a variety of women's experiences and voices. Thank you so much for sharing your creative processes with us.
Thank you.
Jennifer Pettus is a fiber-based installation artist known for using a wide range of media to create dynamic sculptures. Rebecca Vaughan is an installation artist who explores the ways in which we regulate our social relationships. She teaches at the Kansas City Art Institute. And they created for Pink Progression Collaborations an artwork titled "Why Was She Removed and Then Put Back?" Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. All the way from out here in Missouri, Kansas City. Well, okay, first of all, I'm like seeing some faces and I miss you guys after having moved away from Denver. I see some folks out there, which I really miss, and I'm so glad to see. And so I had the best time working with Jen. We actually went to undergrad together at CU Boulder many moons ago. We were both sculpture majors. So I'll just dive in and then we could toggle back and forth. The piece called "Why Was She Taken Out and Put Back In?" The title refers to some research I was doing. I somehow stumbled upon the history of the letter Z in the alphabet. And at one time, the letter Z was removed and then placed back in, later found to be of use, of assistance, of help. And so I got to thinking about what is this state of being cast out and being let back in, being once in a family and then being pushed out, becoming feral maybe, and then brought back in to the fold. So that refers to a lot of the parts of this piece that are both covered and uncovered, on top of the base, leaping off of the base, referring to a middle state that's going on. And I'll also say that this base is actually just like a windmill base. It came with a top that spins in the wind. And I was really interested in the shape more so because of the elevation. Jen and I talked about how could we get these characters to get some height so that they were surveying, that they were somehow looking down at you. They were sentinels was another conversation, a title that we'd floated about. And then I just went in and fitted these parts with some MDF so as to provide a kind of a base for the creatures. And then I guess I'll toggle over to Jen now.
So, I mean, honestly, this for me was an opportunity to do something that I'd wanted to do for a long time, which is work with Rebecca, who, like she said, we've known each other for a long time. We come from similar sort of aesthetic backgrounds in terms of who we studied with, and so this was a good opportunity for that. And there's a lot of elements in our work, I think, that were similar that we wanted to pull out, things of, beauty, relationships, intimacy. So I think, like a lot of people, we didn't have the opportunity to do as much as we wanted with this. We did have the some team with the city pretty early on in the collaboration, so we were working that way already before COVID. But we ended up, in terms of the actual collaboration, just sort of mailing pieces and materials back and forth to try to play with. I tried to work off of her gouache painting of fabrics, found fabrics, with the pins that I was using, so playing with those patterns. And then just speaking to the idea of embellishment versus, sort of body parts, and then the whole thing being sort of on this windmill, which was kind of an amplification of all that. So that's kind of where I was coming from with this.
Well, so Jen and I both have admired each other's work for decades, and both working in fiber medium a lot. What was kind of like this perfect marriage was the fact that Jen has embellished through embroidery and found objects, many of her fetish-like objects, her wall pieces, her fiber pieces and sculptures. And so I have recently combined, started to do this research. So I found this museum in London. It's called the Foundling Museum, and it's the location where in the 1700s, if a person relinquished their child, they brought it to the Foundling Hospital. And when they processed the child, when they did the intake paperwork, they asked the person who was relinquishing the child to leave a matching piece of fabric. So they call these textile tokens. And this piece of textile that was kept in their files, also the person who relinquished the child had to keep the matching piece safe in case years later they wanted to come and claim the child, which blew me away. It was like this unbelievable, delicate, easily lost and destroyed, ephemeral way to connect one to a person for whom is totally unique in their life. And so I have begun this process of reproducing these textiles that I have found in the archives of the Foundling Museum. And so this idea then, why was she cast out and then brought back in, was also has a lot to do with the fact that I have been searching for my own biological family my whole life. And so these reproductions of textiles are meant to be like signals out into the world to seek family, to seek connection, to find a person, the person, match up families. And so this is why they also, Jen and I talked about having them up high so they could be looking, but they could be more easily seen. So all of those repeat patterns I did here in Kansas City, and then Jen and I would mail some parts back and forth to each other. So we were just like the last pair where we were 600 miles apart and had to send them to each other. And then I'll pass the baton back to Jen. I don't want to feel like I'm dominating, sucking up all the time.
Obviously, Rebecca and I both work in a way that's very tactile and inviting, and I think it took on an interesting meaning once COVID happened, and all of a sudden we couldn't touch anything. So I thought that element of it sort of worked nicely with the state of the world. I don't really have much else, Rebecca. Do you have anything else to add?
I think the one last thing I just wanted to be sure to touch upon is what these animals are. They are taxidermy blanks. So if you were a hunter and you killed an animal, you would go to this this business, and they make these foam blank animals that are these kind of hideous, skinless, but vulnerable creatures. And so these are actually 3 bobcats in various states of lunging or pouncing or jumping away or jumping on top of you. And so they are both aggressive, but they're skinless, so they have no power, and yet they are at this height. So taxidermy blanks, so they're foam, and they come in parts. So when you order, you're not, nobody here is a hunter, I know, but when you order your taxidermy blank, it comes in different parts. So you could see on this slide that Anna's showing, you could see where the back and the front meet, and that's actually how it shows up in the mail. And so you have to find gives you the option as the taxidermist, if you have like a long torso on your dead, sad bobcat, you can shorten or lengthen it there. But so you could see how we can join the halves. But that's also how Jen and I worked to collaborate, was that we would send each other body parts through the mail. So that was fun and weird and cool. And light, they're foam, so it's very light, and shipping was cheap.
I love what you said in your statement. And this is a quote from your statement. In mounting them on a windmill, the bobcat blinks become larger than life amplified charms, emitting desire, intimacy, deformity, and repulsion. And just observing them in the round too at the gallery. So you can see all those textures and the dynamic movement as the bobcats defy gravity, and they're kind of frozen in time, leaping from that windmill. And I love how their forms become mutated in a magical way with unexpected colors, patterns, and textures. So definitely go to the Arvada Center to see these fabulous artworks that we're presenting to you today. The show's up not too much longer, through November 8th. So we do have some time, and you can reserve your tickets at the Arvada Center site, and also by calling the box office. All right. Thank you so much, Jen and Rebecca.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything. The artists, this is amazing.
Yeah, it's a fabulous show. And thank you for being a part of it.
You bet.
Let's transition to our next group, which is Laleh, Mehran, and Jayne Butler. Welcome and thank you for joining us. So Laleh uses digital physical spaces to explore the complex intersections between politics, religion, and science. She is a professor and director of the Emergent Digital Practices at the University of Denver. Jayne Butler is an interdisciplinary artist who investigates the gray area between our objective reality and digital life. And they created this installation you're seeing right here titled Soft Matter.
Thank you so much. It's really fantastic to be here. And I just want to echo what everyone else is saying, which is obviously we would love to be in person. There's so many thank yous for us to give. So please indulge me as I go through them as fast as possible. And thank you for your amazing foresight for continuing to organize what is really necessary to have women's voices, in particular in this region. A huge and enormous and undying gratitude to Colin and Emily, without whom this literally would not have happened. The Arvada Center, Chris Coleman, who was absolutely instrumental, Cordelia Taylor, and also Julian Young. So we did have quite the, I would say, professional crew to support us. It's been really inspiring to see the variety of artworks. I think there's something really powerful about having the diverse voices and the ways that they're represented, and then all of the personal details that come through. It's really, they're poetic, the strengths are compounded and just really beautiful. So again, just really thrilled and honored that we're part of the show. So Jayne and I met, we were trying to figure it out. We think it's back in 2015 when she started as an MFA graduate student at her program at the University of Denver. And I was her professor and mentor, and we soon became colleagues and collaborators. And so when Anna extended this invitation for Pink Progression, it honestly didn't take me much time. I immediately thought of Jayne. Her work has a lot to do with understanding and really being critical of our intersectionalities, what it means to be feminist, really dissecting it. And she's a deep thinker and a very skilled artist. So I was super excited that there was this possibility to work together. And of course, then other global things happened, which were beyond our control. Jayne lives in Miami, Florida, 2 zone times difference and about 2,000 miles. So thankfully she was able to visit before everything happened, but it's been quite the challenge for us to work in these extended zones, with both of us having full-time job commitments, which we're fortunate to have. But it's been, I would say, less than ideal in the kind of fantasy of process and making.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure to work with Laleh. I've admired her work for so long, and really felt like of anybody, since she was my mentor through my graduate program, that she understood my process, and I also feel like I understood her process since I learned from her. So given the constraints, I think we made the best of it. And I'm really happy with what we were able to put together. So just some thoughts about the concept for our work. So obviously we wanted to celebrate the 19th Amendment, and as a critical step towards equality, but we also wanted to recognize that it's not the only step, and we're still fighting for equality for people of color and women of color. So we wanted to really think about what are the conditions that allowed for the suffrage movement to happen, and really what makes social progress and social change possible. So we started to think a lot about collective movement, how our individual actions together create social change, and create social progress, especially at this kind of critical moment in our history, reflecting on what our individual actions mean for collective movement and social change, I think is really vital. So that really became kind of the crux of this project, of really hoping that when folks look at this piece or experience this piece, that they really think about how their individual actions might facilitate or enable social change. Since I am based in Miami, and Laleh's in Colorado, we had all these grand plans for me flying back and us having time to create together, but that changed, and that's okay, because we were in serious constant communication. We have, I think it's like 100-page Google Doc between ideas and concepts. So I think a big part of this project really boiled down to trust, of really trusting in each other's creative process, really being intuitive about the way that we were working. And also it ended up really reflecting back into the piece of us, our individual actions creating this larger movement. So a little bit about the inspiration for the project. We originally were really inspired by biology and connectivity in biology, really thinking about shimmering hives and kind of flocking birds as those kind of collective movement and the individual actions, and really thinking too a lot about facilitation, thinking about flocking birds, kind of one bird moving so another bird can get to a different place. And oftentimes with social movements, sometimes it's just about getting out of the way and passing the mic. So this was kind of what started kind of our process for creation. And through the process, we had many months of just material testing and kind of intuitively figuring out what form it might take and what materials we might use, and we landed here with this kind of combination, and we really wanted kind of a balance between organic and inorganic forms to kind of create some ambiguity, like not really knowing what it was made out of. But we ended in using the hexagon form, both because of its kind of nod to biology, as well as its kind of additive quality and it being kind of a perfect geometric shape. So this part was a heavy part of pre-production. I made a lot of these in my living room to then ship to Laleh, who was very kind to take on our install with the Arvada team.
So as Janie's indicating, she would send me these like amazing gift packages that like weigh 20 pounds. I think by the end we've calculated roughly 800 of these hexagons. So as Janie's expanding on our project, one of the things we were really mindful of is that we're not representing every single voice. And so we really wanted to be careful and thoughtful about that. And so some of the things that we were more focused on had to do with our intergenerational nature and multiculturalism, And also, again, very much recognizing that we do currently have these privileged positions. And so how do you create the space and then allow for the communities that you're trying to help and literally get out of the way? So really, again, understanding that the power position with all of this. As we were trying to figure out what we were doing, we originally had a much more abstract notion of what we wanted. And as things started to unfold, the process really spoke to us. The space was really important. It was such a site-specific place that we wanted to have this dialogue. We really needed to have both kind of literal and symbolic viewing from the top and the bottom. So we wanted to have these viewpoints. And then we soon realized that this form that we wanted to be more abstract in this kind of biological form of kind of the flocking and the shimmering that you saw earlier really needed to be in the shape of a figure, and more particularly a human figure, and maybe even more specifically female. And it's kind of interesting because neither one of us really does figurative work. That's not our wheelhouse, or I would say something that comes back as a specific form in our projects. So there was something really important to have in that. And then as we were trying to figure these things out, we were like, okay, what's going to inspire us? And of course, they were these gorgeous ancient vessels, but none of these spoke to the actual site specificity of the space. And so we wanted something that was literally putting a hand on the second floor window, and the other one was basically giving a hand or lending a hand or offering a hand. And so we wanted to have this both. You need to stabilize yourself and you're showing something from one side, but you're also helping with the other side. So this was quite a process, I would say, that happened very organically. And even though we weren't on site doing it, but it really was in collaboration with the actual architecture of the Arvada Center.
Yeah, and so I'll start by talking a little bit about the experience of the work. Obviously it's taking kind of a sculptural form, but we were really thinking about it as kind of an interactive installation, since the physical shape it came to be kind of was happening through the process and definitely at the tail end of the process. For those who haven't been to the gallery yet, when you approach the work, there is a soundscape with the project, and there are additional layers of sound that kind of envelop you as you approach the work and get close to it. I'm going to share just a quick audio clip.
Libertad. Özgürlük. ความเป็นอิสระ Libertad.
So that's just a short clip of the type of sound you'll hear. So we wanted to kind of emulate kind of being a part of a protest or a gathering, and you'll hear kind of different languages chanting liberty or freedom, and just kind of going off of what Laleh was saying of not one particular voice or one particular place, and really trying to encompass many viewpoints within the project.
And then just on the second floor, again, we wanted to have this nod and this presence. And so it's just a abstract video animation that basically, again, as our bigger concept shows, smaller individual kind of shapes and nodes that come together to build a bigger, formidable kind of movement and kind of galvanize, strength.
And this is the video. Go ahead, Laleh.
They're just excerpts, just a couple of seconds to show the different kinds. Again, it was really important to us that it wasn't a singular voice or a singular kind of notion of what can make change and what is activism, what the things that need to shift for all of us are slightly different. And we really wanted to be, I would say, overtly aware and cognizant of that representation.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your processes with us. The installation is impressive in scale and engaging in dramatic ways, as the reflective metallics act like mirrors, incorporating the images of viewers as they engage with the work. The added sounds and multimedia video further engage our senses as we think about collective movement to inspire social change. Thank you so much, Laleh and Jayne, again, for sharing your creative processes with us.
Thank you. It's been great to share about the work.
It's really our pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Belgin's art creates meaning and beauty in subtle simplicity while enhancing our imagination. She is a current board member at the Derry Art Center and grant panelist at the Boulder Arts Commission. Waldman is a poet, curator, activist, and author of over 50 books of poetry. Akin Koksal is an engineer and artist in design and manufacturing of electric mechanical devices. Welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Anna. So I would like to start thanking to both Emily and Colin for their support and being responsive throughout the project, both during the design phase and the installation phase. Thank you. And Anna, thanks to you for starting all this with pink progressions originally, and then coming up with the idea of collaborations. And Anne Waldman, unfortunately, she's not going to be here, but I would like to read to you something that she had said about collaborations. Working in collaboration is one of the most important practices for artists in these times. All kinds of new structures present themselves in new dimensions of space and time. So I think she's traveling, so unfortunately, she will not be here. But I would like to go through the whole project with you. Last year, early in February, Anna invited me to take part in this exhibition, and the themes were of interest to me. I've been doing a lot of work for equality and women's rights. So I'll show you an example of one of my previous works, which is actually about women's rights in Islamic countries. And this installation is called Overwritten Scripts. And this is what you're looking at is a proposal for an exhibition. So as soon as I heard from Anna, I thought that's a great opportunity for me. So I looked for a poet, and I found Anne Waldman, which I'm sure most of you know already. She's a prominent poet, and she writes about these subjects. So she wrote back to me immediately, and to my surprise from friends, and accepted my offer. I told her that I was going to do something with Prince using her poetry, and then we started working together. So the next few months were mostly coming up with ideas for the art installation itself. And I wanted to create something that has space around it, so that the visitors could have the time and the space to contemplate. So I was thinking it should have the poetry at the same time, the prints too, so that they could be there and look at the prints that I would be creating and read the poetry at the same time too. So during this time, I met with Akin, who is here with us tonight, and he helped me quite a lot with the design. So I also would like to share with you something that I had seen a couple months before the show, which was actually an installation in a ship at the Marine Museum of Barcelona. And the exhibition was about gyotaku, which is actually a traditional Japanese technique of making prints of fish. The fishermen have been using this technique since mid-18th century to record their catches. So I was really impressed with all this, and I thought I could do something similar to this because it's floating, it's light, and it actually it's very impressive. So what I have been also doing during this time was that I was working with really light materials. I'm really impressed with the idea of kind of defying gravity in a way. So you're looking at a previous installation of mine, which is called Floating Children. And this is in a very old mansion in Chicago. And the material that I used is ultra sheer, really light material. And the idea that I had was if I were to print these photographs of Syrian children on these really light materials, then the children would conjure up the image of like children as if they are floating up in the air in a way that they could disappear someday, because as you most of you know, these children have been in war since 2011, so they're all fragile. So I wanted to use the same or similar kinds of materials in my exhibition for Anne as well, because she, even though her wording is really strong, she's talking about the fragility of humanity and also the fragility of women in a way. So here is a short video of what I created with this installation showing a number of prints. I created 12 prints. So I wanted them to be floating, kind of like in a dream state that would reflect Anne Waldman's fascinating poetry in a way. So at that time, I met with Akin a couple times. I actually told him about my ideas of having this moving system with weights. And he kind of brought me back to reality and said that it's almost impossible to have perpetual motion without an external force or like a momentum, right? So Akin, you may want to say some things about your own design here.
The type of movement for the prints that Belgin initially wanted would only be possible with some power from motors and should be transmitted through wires via pulleys. We created this design you see on the screen. So the prints would be rotating around the frame with the help of a motor, and due to limitations, we had to divert from this.
Yes, we actually were very ambitious at the beginning. We applied to a number of grants, but it coincided with the start of the pandemic, unfortunately, and most of the funding were directed towards artists who were in need of funding because of COVID. So eventually, we didn't receive any funding except the generous funding from Darwa, the Art Center. But so we had to simplify our design. And so Akin came up with this idea of using...
Yeah, I thought and discussed with Belgin about many simpler designs, but none of them truly reflected the idea of defying the gravity. So I came up with the idea hanging each of the prints with flying balloons, which would also mean this exhibition was the celebration of the 19th Amendment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was great. I thought that was a great idea. And then the next couple months was for me really searching for the right material. So I contacted a number of manufacturers in China and for a silk-like material that would represent both the intensity and the lightness of Anne Waldman's poetry. And then I searched a number of papers, maybe 10 to 20 different types of papers. I tried them, most of them Japanese papers. And the ink, of course, needed to be right. So I tried different types of ink. And late August, I met with Anne Waldman in one of my favorite coffee shops in Boulder, the Trident coffee shop that she chose. And she was very generously and gracefully suggested a couple things to me about the artwork. And she suggested that it needs to be, it could be abstract rather than really realistic. And I could have some kind of wording from her poetry and monochromatic, mostly, not so many colors. And that was what I had in mind. So the next couple months, we kept talking and emailing each other, and also with Akin. And during the time of the isolation, it was great actually for me to delve into Anne's poetry and trying to understand her poetry, because actually it is very difficult at the beginning to comprehend what she's trying to say. But her poetry at the same time is very intricate, very sincere, and surprising, actually delightfully surprising too, because she refers to a lot of different subjects and areas of interest like history, politics, and spirituality. So I had to go back and search some of the concepts that she had been referring to. So these are some of the studies, and this is my studio window during those dark isolation days. And here's me doing one of the prints that belongs to this installation. And then here I am again printing. I did everything by hand. And here's one of the prints that I created based on her poetry again, as it's kind of floating as I really imagined them to be. And then here we are now in front of the Arvada Center. It's like the big moment, and we are about to install. And here's me and Akin inside the building installing the balloons. And Anne Waldman's poetry is written and printed on those silk-like materials. And here's the final installation itself. And just to give you one example, this is a poem that I created based on her poet called Gypsy Nun. And I actually created 12 prints based on her poetry. But I just wanted to give you this as an example. So Gypsy Nun, the poem itself, is inspired by a Spanish poet, Lorca. And it's about a young woman whose desires contradict her religious calling. Through the visual details and symbolic references Anne Waldman portrayed in her poem, I visualized a room behind an isolating mashrabia made of the poem itself. So mashrabia is kind of an architectural detail that is used a lot in Islamic countries, and it's a lattice woodwork, and the idea is really that the insiders could see outside, but the outsiders cannot see them. So and that finalizes my presentation, and thank you very much for all your attention and for being here at this late hour of the night.
Thank you so much. I really love how suspended in space the poems and prints float in an ethereal cloud of words and visuals as balloons further that suspension and flight. And the many concepts that were explored in the installation are so engaging, like mythology, politics, and spirituality, and more. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Sherry Wiggins is an interdisciplinary artist who explores feminist themes. She is represented by Michael Warren Contemporary in Denver, and Luis Felipe Branco is a filmmaker, producer, and photographer based in Lisbon, Portugal. And they created My Claude, My Medusa. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you to everybody involved in this remarkable collaborative exhibition. It's quite a feat. And thank you, Anna and Emily and Colin and all the staff at the Arvada Center. It's been wonderful to be a part of this. I'm presenting this project that I created with photographer Luis Branco, and he cannot be here tonight. It's 3:00 in the morning in Lisbon. But this is also a collaboration with French artist Claude Cahun. And she lived, she was born in 1894 and she died in 1954. And I'll be talking about these two different collaborations that are intertwining and also have been are ongoing for me and have been very productive and fruitful. So this is the installation at the Arvada Center of my Claude, my Medusa, and you can see that I've reproduced this image of Claude Cahun that was taken in 1915 when she was about 20 years old, and then we did a remake of this image, and then I wrote a poem about it. And so I'm going to first talk about my collaboration with Luis Branco and the history of that. We've been working together since 2015. This is an image that we made during that first collaboration. We created it at the Obras Artist Residency in Portugal. And I had traveled to Portugal and to the Obras Artist Residency to make performative works with some influence by the Portuguese artist Helena Almeida, who's this remarkable performance artist. She passed away in 2018. And I had asked the residency to find a person to help me photograph and to do these performative works. And the Obras Artist Residency is located in this beautiful rural area, the Alentejo region of Portugal. And it's full of sheep and cork trees and castles and ancient stones. And it's when I first went there 5 years ago, I had no idea that I would continue working with Luis as much as I have, which is I've traveled to Portugal multiple times to work with him, and we have shown our work in the US and in Portugal. And I'll just show you a few of the images we've made over the last 5 years. We made this image in 2015 near Everamont, which is this mountain in the Alentejo. When I first saw this image and converted to black and white, I just sort of had this flash that we had some really kind of unique thing going, where this sort of older woman in the landscape, this feminine in the landscape, that there was this, we were on to something in our work together. And so I returned to Portugal in 2016, and this is called Woman in the Pego de Sino in this beautiful canyon. And we kept continuing, and I returned, and these are just a few of the thousand, we've produced a huge amount of work, and I'm just showing you sort of highlights. And in 2017, I returned to Portugal to work with Luis again, and this time we focused on water, on this sort of feminine in the water. And this is called Face Up in the Rio Sever. And this is an image we created that year in 2017. The title is Encarnado, which is in Portuguese. Encarnado is the color red, but it's also about incarnation and the sort of embodiment in human beings of some kind of spiritual force. And this image is, we showed this at Redline during Month of Photography. It was 6 feet tall, and it's quite a powerful image. This is an image we made in 2019 in the spring. We titled this Woman Seated at Everamont. Right after this time I spent in Portugal in 2019, I traveled to the Netherlands to begin a project with Claude Cahun. And this is the Obras Artist Residency in this small village in Holland. And Luis came to work with me. And actually, this is when Anna contacted me when I was there and asked me to be a part of the show. And I was already, producing this work in relationship to Claude Cahun. So I want to talk a little bit about that collaboration and what that entails. And I've chosen Claude Cahun to study and embody. She's been on my radar for several years. My friend Sandra Furman calls this process that I've enacted with several different women artists of the 20th century, she calls it an embodied research process. I choose women whose work has some relationship to mine in method or content or medium, and I study their work in depth, and then I make my own work in relationship. This long-term project, I call it Searching Selves, and I document this on my blog, and I've been doing this for the last 7 years, really. And so this double image of Cahun, this was made in 1928. And this image of her, now in our contemporary world, we would call Cahun they. But anyway, but I call them Cahun. So Claude Cahun was born Lucie Renée Mathilde Schwab in Nantes, France in 1894. She was born into an intellectual Jewish family. Early in life, Schwab identified as gender fluid. As a teenager, Lucie met their life partner, Suzanne Malherbe. The two were step-siblings. Beginning around 1917, Schwab took on the gender-neutral name Claude Cahun, and Suzanne Malherbe took the name Marcel Moore. They moved to Paris, and they were very much part of the Bohemian art scene in the 20s. Cahun came to be regarded as a significant surrealist writer, artist, and photographer. Moore was best known for her drawings and illustrations. They were partners in art and life. It is most likely that Moore was behind the lens of many of these remarkable portraits that Cahun has become known for. Though during Cahun's lifetime, these weren't shown in exhibitions. It was more of a kind of a private practice. They lived, Moore and Cahun lived together until Cahun's death in 1954. It's a fascinating life that they led. And so I initially found Cahun because of the portraits, but I soon began studying her texts. Disavowals is, it was published first in 1928, and it's sort of a surrealist autobiography. But I chose this text called Heroines that was first published in 1925 to really study and research and embody. And it's a fascinating, it's a wonderful series of essays. I have the English version of it that was translated in 1999. She writes these short monologues about different heroines. They're very feminist and sardonic and just wonderful about Eve and Salome and Sappho and Cinderella, and there's 15 of them. But I chose a specific essay called The Essential Wife, or the Unknown Princess. This is her writing is wonderful. And I chose this story to embody and enact because it was kind of close to my own story, as my life story, kind of. Luis Branco came to this house, this amazing house in the Netherlands, and the house also had this, because I was writing about the wife and the princess. The house was actually named after a castle. So we shot thousands of images, and during this time, Anna contacted me and asked if I would do something for the show. So that project, this is another one of the images. I'm making those that series into a book that is images and text that I've written. I'm also using Kaun's text, and I'm producing that as a book and a show, an exhibition. Actually, at Michael Moran in March and April, it will be there. But at the same time, while we were there, we decided to, I wanted to do this remake of this early Kaun photograph that was shot, as I said before, this was shot in 2015. I think she was about 21 years old. And I just saw it as, this was the beginning of her remarkable life as an artist, as a human being, as a, this gender fluid, amazing writer. And she actually became an anti-Nazi activist during the Second World War. So we reenacted this, and we shot hundreds of images with a flash, without a flash. I chose this one because I don't know, it has this power. But when I first saw these images of myself, I was like, oh my God, I look like Medusa. And then I thought, well, that's really kind of apropos or Kahunian, because Medusa would be a heroine of Claude Kaun's. And so for the exhibit, I also and I just wanted to say, when we were doing this photo shoot, I imagined myself and Kaun. It was this embodiment thing. I imagined myself at 20 and Kaun at 20, and myself at 30 and Kaun at 30, and I sort of went through the years. She died at 60, and I was 63 when we shot this series. So for the Arvada Center, for the installation, or for this show, I wrote a text. I'm not a writer, and but working with Kaun as an inspiration, I have been writing, and actually, so I wrote this poem. Actually, my friend Sydney Payton, who is a writer, and helped me some because I'm finessed the whole thing. But so I'm going to read it now. How am I femme straight when my partner is queer? Am I wrong to enter into another's gender territory? Why can't we all be gender fluid as we want when we want to? Performing Claude Kaun, I am Medusa. Like she, like they, I repel and attract. I am a snake-haired monster, a sexy goddess, a femme fatale at 63, 64, 65, and so on. When I give a certain look, it turns men, only men, to stone. Then all can see who is looking at whom. We occupy territories where dreams arise, where the dream lives in waking hours. Your Claude, my Medusa, we are bound to you. And the backstory on this whole thing, which I haven't prepared to talk about it, but I've talked about it. I think I talked about it in my statement at the Arvada Center, is that, Claude Kaun, I've been working with all these different artists, but entering into her territory, their territory, is complex. I am a straight woman, but as it turns out, I'm married, my marriage of 39 years now, 7 years ago, my partner, we have 4 children, and decided that he wanted to become a woman. And so I have entered this queer territory. whether I wanted to or not. And so working with Kathryn and her oeuvre has been, you know, kind of a liberating and remarkable experience for me, because her ideas about identity and are so fluid, and she there's no staticness, you know, that why can't we all be gender fluid as we want when we want to. So that's my story. So
it's fascinating. Again, when you go to the gallery, you'll see Sherry's work, and that 1914 self-portrait of Claude juxtaposed with a contemporary 2019 photograph of Sherry. And you'll see that them together on that wall. Gender fluidity is such an important concept to explore in a society that has simplified gender for far too long. And I also have a quote that I want to share with you from Claude. Under this mask, another mask. I will never be finished removing all these faces. Thank you so much, Sherry, for sharing your processes with us.
Thank you so much. And a big shout out to Emily. She was like so helpful in figuring it out, how to put it all together and install it and stuff. Thank you.
Susan Goldstein is a multifaceted artist who is known for her photographic work, collage, as well as installation. Gayla Lemke is known for her ceramic sculpture and is a longtime member of Edge Gallery and teaches at the Art Students League of Denver.
It's good to see everyone. I want to thank Anna, Emily, Colin, and everybody at the Arvada Center for making this exhibit happen in this remarkably complicated time. I wish that current circumstances hadn't converged to make Gayla, our installation, more timely, but that is exactly what has happened with the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I wrote out my presentation to try to keep myself on track. When I was invited to participate, I immediately knew what I wanted to show. I had an existing piece that I felt would be appropriate because it directly relates to women's rights and the right to vote. And I asked the Arvada Center and Anna to see if it would be all right to show a previously exhibited piece, and the answer was yes. And so I invited Gayla Lemke to collaborate with me. The bed and the quilt were already made, and the image on the left with the glass is the original installation, which was at Edge Gallery. I knew all the additional pieces in this photograph would be replaced by elements that Gayla would contribute. And the collaboration went really smoothly, and it turned out to be a lifeline for me in this time of incredible isolation. Gayla and I managed to get together twice before the lockdown. She came to visit me at my studio to see the bed, and then we met at the Arvada Center to try to figure out what kind of a location we would prefer to show the bed. And when it turned out that a corner wasn't available, we just shifted our design and made things work with a wall behind it. So our collaborative experience is really quite different than everybody else, because Gayla was essentially responding to an existing piece. I'm going to talk about my original installation. I'm a former member of Edge Gallery, where I met Gayla, and in August of 2007, we selected our show slots for 2008. The presidential election was coming up, and in November of 2008, I knew I wanted to make a political show. This was 13 years ago, and I don't remember exactly the way things played out, but at some point I decided I wanted to address the relationship between the president and potential vacancies on the US Supreme Court. Obama and Joe Biden were running against John McCain and Sarah Palin. The Republicans' choice of Palin was a strategic choice, pandering to the religious right, and she, like Mike Pence, held strong anti-abortion sentiments. I titled the show Hijacked, and that's what this image that we're looking at is right now. Because many years ago, the Republican Party made a strategic decision to use evangelical Christians and the issues that are important to them, including abortion, as a unifying way to grow the Republican voter base. This was not a new strategy in 2008, but the choice of Palin as a running mate for McCain put an exclamation point on this approach because she was so ill-prepared for the job. This is one of the most complicated projects I've tackled, and trying to tie together my ideas visually was really, really challenging. First, I decided I wanted to make a quilt using a pattern made up of coat hangers. I found some tiny dollhouse coat hangers, and after a lot of experimenting, I used a scan of one of them and Photoshop to create the pattern for the quilt. And I was really lucky when I found this twin bed at an antique store. It was a perfect piece for the installation because the eagle carved in the headboard directly relates to the issue of the state controlling women's bodies. I played with a variety of patterns and I created a couple that incorporated color, but I eventually decided to use a stark black and white pattern because that best represented the way in which much of the population views women's reproductive rights. I ended up installing the bed on a carpet of broken glass to represent both the fact that if McCain was elected, not only would Palin break the glass ceiling, but the physical well-being of women seeking abortions would be potentially at risk. Once I selected this pattern, the man who prints my photographs printed it on cotton. Through a quilting supply store, I found a woman with a quilting machine who to sew the quilt together, and another woman to bind the edges. I don't sew, and so I needed help. And unlike any other art that I've created, this piece truly is a collaboration and is now stronger with the addition of the pieces that Gayla made. I know it seems like this was a totally serious endeavor, and it was, but I had a lot of fun putting it together. And one of the images that I came up with for the original show, which I'll leave you with this thought, is what if the first president of the United States had been Martha instead of George Washington? We wouldn't be having the conversations we're having now.
So after Susan and I met at her studio to look at the bed and take measurements, I came home and I started to do drawings and sketches to try to figure out what I was going to do and what I was going to add to the installation. And I knew I wanted to include a ceramic book, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do for the wall pieces. So I just kept doing drawings. We also didn't know for sure what our configuration was going to be, if it was going to be a corner or a wall just behind the bed. So I just kept working, and we came up with the idea of making it as kind of a room installation. So for the wall, I decided to do vessels. Okay, so what I decided for the wall pieces, I was going to do 2 wall vessels that were kind of like sconces. So in order to make those, I had to build them from the bottom up. After they were built, we had to figure out what was going to go inside of these. As when they were leather hard, I had taken the text, "My Body, My Choice," and stamped that randomly into the vessels. And I got that from one of the signs that I had seen at the Women's March in January of 2017. And it just kind of stuck in my head. So I used that on the outside of the vessels. The inside of them was just used with a black underglaze. But it took us a while to figure out what was actually going to be in the vessels. We bounced back and forth quite a bit on this. And given that the show was celebrating women's right to vote, and we just so recently were still marching and protesting, I found a vintage photograph of women marching for the right to vote. And then Susan had a photograph that she had taken in the Women's March and after Trump was elected. So we took those photos, had them mounted on foam core. I attached them to pieces of wood so that they looked like miniature protest signs, and those went in the vessels. And using this kind of brought in the historical factor too, that 100 years ago we're marching and today we're still marching for equality. The barbed wire that I used was kind of random. I had some here and I thought it would make a nice visual and cast nice cool shadows. So I used the barbed wire, and it was only recently that I did a little bit of research and found out that barbed wire can often be used as a symbol for strength to overcome oppression and degradation. I knew from the very beginning when I was doing this that I was going to want to do one of my ceramic books, because I'd done several of these in the past, and I thought it would be a good addition to this room scene. And also, it was a good way to add text to it. I used quotes from Justice Ginsburg because I recognized her importance on the Supreme Court and also her lifelong work for women's equality. And this was done prior to her passing. So I found some quotes from some of her earlier writings that I put on the right side of the book. And the lower quote was actually something that she said during her Senate confirmation hearings. The other side of the book, I used the miniature wire coat hangers that Susan had that she had used to come up with the design for her quilt, and they had also been in her original installation. So I used those to press into clay and add the texture to it. And after the book was made, it needed a base, it needed a place to rest. So given that we were going towards this room setting, we talked about doing a table, and turns out this is one of Susan's grandmother's table. So again, it brings the history into the installation. The last element that we had to deal with was the space above the headboard in between the bedposts. We talked about incorporating a flag into the piece and also wanted to incorporate an actual wire coat hanger. So we kind of went back and forth quite a while on this as well. At one point, we had thought about draping a flag over the foot of the bed, or having throw pillows that were the flag. And then we just kind of decided, well, what about just hanging the flag on the hanger and sticking it on the wall? And it actually worked. It kind of brought the whole thing together. And another interesting part about this particular flag is that it is a flag with only 48 stars. So again, it's like moving back in time and bringing history into it and moving backwards. And this is the final piece, My Body, My Choice, My Vote. And I think it pulled together all of our ideas and our thoughts about what's happening now and what could happen in the future and what could happen making us go backwards. And thank you for everything that you've done to the Arvada Center and Anna and Colin and Emily. It's great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the processes, I always love those images because it takes us back into the making of the work, which is always fascinating. And the use of actual materials like a life-size bed has really a powerful effect in relating one's body to the bed while finding the pattern on the blanket. And the ceramic book gained a whole new layer of meaning while the installation was on view at the Arvada Center as Ruth Ginsburg, a cultural, legal, and feminist icon, passed away. So thank you again for creating this powerful piece for the show and participating in this talk to share your processes with us. Veronica Herrera uses color, organic form, and pattern as inspiration in her work and has taught at the University of Colorado, Denver for many years. And Lola has created abstract expressionist paintings and continues to, and is represented by William Havu Gallery and teaches at the Front Range Community College. So as Veronica gets the presentation going, the artists asked if I could read their artist statement to accompany their presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So the mixed media paintings Emergence 1 and Emergence 2 were created in a collaborative effort between Veronica and Lola. The artists had been contemplating cycles and stages of growth while taking time to notice what emerges from various phases of life. The integration of Herrera's botanical drawings and Montejo's expressionist marks take on a new life and flourish in a garden. Lola's abstract gestures were shaped through color and movement, responding to the organic forms of Veronica's work. The artwork focuses on living an interconnected universe. The color palette draws from the common colors within their cultures, such as lime, fuchsia, orange, violet, and aqua. The dahlia and avocado are the national flower and fruit of Mexico, while the pomegranate and carnation are the national fruit and flower of Spain. It was important to both artists to represent their cultural heritage in these pieces. Working in collaboration was a rewarding experience for both artists. Their reactions to each other's work provided an opportunity to learn from each other. As they traded artwork, they considered how best to cultivate their ideas together. The creation of their pieces exists like a garden composed of diverse varieties of growth and conception.
So yeah, these are the two pieces that are in the show. They're titled Emergence 1 and 2. The 1 is on the left and 2 is on the right. These are mixed media pieces with both like color pencil, watercolor marker, flash, and I'm forgetting one more thing, Lola. acrylic on illustration board. Okay, so our color palette, as Anna mentioned, we talked about where to draw our colors, and we talked about how different we first talked about our work and how different our work is from each other and how we might incorporate the two. And then we talked about all the things we have in common. We are both mothers, artists, and Latinas, and we talked about how important color is to our work. We discussed that we had a different taste for color because of our cultural upbringing, and the inspiration for our color scheme came from the colorful architecture within our Mexican and Spanish cultures. And we both loved the saturated colors and mix of warm and cool colors to work from. It was important to include references to our cultural heritage, and both of us became interested in the subject of a garden. Pictured here is the dahlia flower, which is the national flower of Mexico. And these are just sketches in preparation. I'm more methodical with my art making process, and so in talking with Lola, I was talking about like, what should I do? Like, I'm so literal with translating my ideas, and she's more of a responsive to the marks and to the shapes. And so we talked about abstracting representation like a flower into shapes and lines and movement, and still carrying the element of nature, but in a more organic and kind of shifting kind of perspective from, you see it literally in places, but then you see it more abstractly in others. And so this is just mark making in abstract forms that I was sketching in my sketchbook and trying to break down the literal stems and flowers and seeds and pods into shapes, and using this color palette that we decided on. And then this is another sketch of how the colors might play next to each other. And then I showed this to Lola and said, is this kind of what, will this work? And she said, yeah, that works for me. And so we were just back and forth, kind of sharing our brainstorming ideas before we started working on our pieces together. And then here's the start of both our collaborations. And this is the Emergence 1. And like I said, this is the Prismacolor marker, color pencil, and watercolor marker. And you can kind of see where the petals and shapes from nature, leaves, stems, are kind of the inspiration here. And then as we pass things back and forth and exchange, the acrylic and flash is added. And while I use sketches and planning, Lola's work is more reflective and usually follows with an understanding of enlightenment rather than coming to the painting with a preconceived idea. And the act of painting reveals the mystery to Lola and discovery in the creation. And then this is just working towards finalizing this piece. And we both responded to colors and shapes and textures as we passed the artwork back and forth, and kind of just deciding how much negative space these works should occupy. And then this is the large piece that we ended up finalizing for Emergence 1. And then for Emergence 2, the same media was used as far as we did in the first piece, and Lola started this one and passed it to me as I started the other and passed it to her, and then we just kind of played around with the shapes and colors, and this is where we ended up with, and so you can see bits of my kind of approach to this collaboration, and representing cultural literally and more loosely, and then Lola's response to my mark making as well. I just wanted to, just share our process and how we got to where we ended up in these two pieces.
Yeah. Can I jump in and say a few things too? Yeah.
I'm so nervous. I just started talking.
Some technical issues. I had to switch computers, so I didn't have the slides that she was sharing so that I could talk. So that's why she started out reading all that way. But I can wing it pretty good because, like I just mentioned, I think that's kind of more the way I work. And so we only had one meeting live, right? We talked a ton, through emails, and we texted each other through the process all the way. But we met once and kind of came up with this idea that we would each start a piece, that we would each, take on this idea of this kind of garden and this evolution of growth and kind of birthing of nature and life. And so we each started a piece, and then what we did was we kept on trading them. And so every couple weeks, I think it was, we would just trade, even though the virus happened, we would just kind of open each other's car, trunks, and just quickly put the paintings in each other's trunks and take it home and respond to each other's works. And so we kept working that way, going back and forth. And it was kind of interesting at this time that we kind of came up with this theme of the garden, because I also had a friend of mine, another artist, give me this book. It's called I Work Like a Gardener, and it's memoirs by Juan Winograd. And it's kind of a nice little short read. It's some interviews. It's a bilingual book in English and in French. And it talks about Miro really kind of seeing the idea of being an artist being likened to a gardener, and that you are cultivating life and you are bringing life into the world. So I'm going to read a little quotes, because I read this book the whole time that I was creating these works with Veronica, and it really kind of motivated me, where I'm kind of a person who I don't do as much sketching or preparation in my work. I do like to read or look at images and just kind of respond that way in my work. So I'll read you a little part here. It says, an artwork must be fertile. It must give birth to a world. Whether you see it in flowers, people, or horses, matters little, as long as it reveals a world, something alive. More than pictures itself, what counts is what it throws into the air, what it exhales. It doesn't matter if the image is destroyed, art can die. What matters is that it scattered seeds on the ground. And so those are just a couple little passages there that really were kept in my mind as I worked the whole time, and thought about what an amazing opportunity this was, that I am so thankful that Veronica invited me to be a part of this collaboration with her, to get a chance to work with her and create something together. Veronica happened to be actually my professor back when I was an undergrad at MSU, and it's interesting that she taught me actually color theory, and color is such an important part of my work, and it's really one of the main languages that I speak with in my artwork. And so I'm so grateful that she thought of me, because I owe so much to her, and I'm just so appreciative of this experience. I even kind of actually got a little nervous when I thought about the show being about women's rights to vote. And I thought, wait a second, I'm not an American citizen. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an immigrant from Spain, and I can't vote here. I don't have that right, actually. It's not legal for me to do that. And so by being a part of the show, you all included me in a way to have a voice and to be a part of something that I never could before. And that means a lot to me. I actually took my daughter to see the show a few weeks ago. She's been quarantined the whole time, hasn't been able to leave the house. And she says, I have to see this show, Mom. I know, it means a lot to you. So it's the only thing she left the house for. And to be able to take my daughter there, she's actually first generation here now, and she has the right to vote. And so, which is really exciting. And it was just a great experience to be included in this. And I just want to say how thankful I am.
Yeah, and I'm thankful that you both are a part of the exhibition too, and honored that you are a part of it. And it was such a fascinating experience too, because Lola, you're an incredible abstract painter, and Veronica, you're incredible with capturing the details of whatever you're drawing. You draw such a variety of things, and it was fascinating to see these two different styles merge together and create such beautiful unity. Both of you created these two very dynamic compositions, and I really kind of view it as a dance. So it's kind of like a dance between these abstract marks and these fruits and flowers, and I just love how they're mixing together. So thank you again for sharing your processes with us. It was fun to see the compositions evolve through time as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sophie Lynn Morris is a curator and artist who explores pop culture in her practice. She maintains a studio at Tank. Hanna Untiedt is an artist and classically trained violinist. Welcome and thank you for participating in our artist talk today.
Okay. Hi, how's it going? I think we're the only people who are in the same room. How exciting. For this show, we made a video. Oh, shoot. Ugh, I can't get to this thing. This is our piece in the show. Let me read the title. Yeah?
I don't even know what it is off the top of my head.
The title is http:// maybe she's born with it. Maybe it's livelaughLove.com / welcome to my life, my space, my face. #TBT123 100% angel. I think that's it.
Yeah.
That's the title. This is my third time participating in the Pink Progression series, and I just appreciate that these shows show a wide variety of perspectives and let you, there's, like I said earlier, there's sometimes conflicting perspectives, and I think that's cool. And so I think that kind of ended up being something in our piece. Hanna is a friend of mine. We both went to Denver School of the Arts, for a point. And I knew that I wanted to collaborate with her because her work is super different from mine. This is her Instagram. So Hanna is very multi-talented. She makes drawings and illustrations. This is a self-portrait. They're very pop culture aware. She has a great series of self-portraits on her Instagram that are photoshopped. This is her as a walnut. So I just like the sense of humor, and my perspective personally of pink progression is that some of the political stuff gets really extreme and really serious, and at CVA I made a painting that was just like it was pink and it was the names of all of the Kardashians and Jenner family. And so my kind of like basis for going into this show is that like we're all sitting there's really only two ways that people interpret that. One is like the Kardashians, I don't even know who they are, even though they're like powerful women, something about feminism.
Like everyone knows who the Kardashians.
Yeah. Or the only other perspective is people would go in and they'd be like, oh my God, why did she paint Lamar in the painting? So just trying to like broaden that feminist perspective and like, or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, here's Hanna. And then do you want to talk about like how it was at the beginning of the collab?
Sure. So when we first started working on this, we got a green screen, and Sophie told me to kind of just come over to her house with anything that I thought was worthy of being a prop. And so I just brought like a car full of anything I could find that I was like, this might be something. And
we didn't like have any plan.
We had truly no plan at all besides that we wanted to make a video, and we just like put our heads together and
we just started filming random ideas. Like if we were like, I really want to make like this video. So the first scene was something Hanna really wanted to do, which is this like Scrabble letters.
Bananagrams, but sure.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I get. Well, you know, they're like the same tiles. And so the first day that we filmed, we started getting this footage. This is a setup that we did in my old house in the living room with mirrors, and we had a projector, two projectors and mirrors, and we naturally kind of just fell into like filming us like laying down on our phones. And the first clip that I brought was like a selfie of me like flipping my hair in a mirror. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of ended up building it off of selfies. So there's a clip somewhere in here where there's a lot of like our faces melting into each other's faces. The whole project we shot and edited on our phones.
Yeah, we were just kind of like testing out different apps, having fun. Like this was just like a green screen app that we had a lot of fun with and ended up using a lot.
Yeah. And Hanna actually accidentally bought a whole year-long subscription to it. So if anyone needs something green screened, let us know. And we look at it really casually and humorously, and we just like, our whole collaborative process was just like, let's have fun. Mm-hmm. And so it definitely like represents a time and maybe even a generation. But I also think that self-image, that's like the feminist perspective, is that self-image is viewed as self-indulgent when you're femme presenting.
And I think selfies also kind of like reclaim the gaze, you know, like gaze, like
not G-A-Y-S, G-A-Z. Okay, gotcha.
And
right, exactly. That's Woman of Willendorf, right? Like that was like if it is a sculpture of a self, mm-hmm. then you know, that's an interpretation of that body mm-hmm. outside of a patriarchal gaze. And I think we have a lot of that in our, I mean, but maybe we don't also, because we are living under patriarchal gaze.
True.
That being said, like some of these are hot and some of them are not at all. This is another favorite of mine. Hanna we played around with like actual filters. So
Like
that's
gel filters?
yeah,
Gel
like
filters?
yeah, they're light gels, and we played with her like manually adjusting them over the camera, and then we have a lot of scrolling related components. Oh, and then we started experimenting with TikTok. This is my Megan Thee Stallion Savage TikTok, and I put it with like Hollywood famous filters, and so yeah, I don't know. We have a Dropbox link to this video, so I'm gonna put it in the chat. So that
Feel free to watch it.
you can watch it if you want. We decided not to make the piece for sale because no one's gonna buy that.
Right, it's just a bunch of us.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I think it's more, you know. Anyways, I don't know if that's not even like a conclusive thing to say. But yeah, you can all watch it. It's free.
So yeah, for centuries we've been using mirrors to see and explore ourselves, and now, in addition, we're using our phones, which can manipulate.
And now
uh-huh.
every experience that you have now, you are basically talking to yourself on Zoom, even if you know that's a new one.
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
You are constantly looking at yourself when you're in class or in a meeting. So
yeah, it's true. Yeah. So and I feel like phones, like you just showed us that they can manipulate and distort the self-image in crazy ways.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. And the shattered mirror mosaic table juxtaposed with the contemporary video really emphasizes the way in which so many of us have immersed ourselves in technology too. So thank you for creating this really fascinating piece for the exhibition. And again, I thought it really came to life with the mosaic table and the handmade phone as that substrate for the video. Yeah.
I don't know if it's obvious from the photo, but the phone is really big.
Yeah,
it's like 4 feet long.
4 feet.
So
yeah,
go see it in person, and then our video is in the chat now if you guys want to watch. Thank you.
Karina Espinoza focuses on the merging of art and science through new media technology. She teaches at the University of Colorado Boulder. Alyssa is an artist and art educator with a background in illustration and graphic arts. And Joanna is an artist and educator working with emerging technology, and she is a digital media specialist.
So this is our piece. It's called Power and Protest. And originally when Anna asked me to be in the show, I was thinking, who would I want to collaborate with? And I picked Elisa first, and the reason I picked Elisa is because she makes such silly, quirky things, and I knew that was going to be a good mix. So let's see a little bit about how. So this is Elisa's work here on the right with the monkeys, and so you can see what I mean about, like, she's just got this humor in her work that I thought would be dynamite. And then on the left here you can see some images of works that I make. So I specialize in making kinetic sculptures predominantly. And so actually how Elisa and I met is she walked into my gallery one day, Cabal Gallery, and she said that she was from Denver Art Society. And I said, oh yeah, Denver Art Society, I know them. I said, I have a favorite artist there. Every time I go there, I look at this girl's work, and she makes these like unicorns pooping cupcakes and things like that. And I was like, and I just love her work so much. And Elisa was like, hey, that's me, that's my work. And I was like, oh my God, destiny brought you into my gallery today. And so so we've been friends ever since then. I love Elisa, she's really awesome. And then so we got together in a coffee shop and we started brainstorming about what our idea was, and we went through this whole thing where we talked ourselves. We wanted to make animated cartoon uteruses that were protesting to have their rights and not to be ruled by the government anymore. And so we got to talking, and we were like, yeah, we're going to make uterus people and it's going to be great, and we're going to animate them and we're going to make them kinetic and they're going to be life size, and we're talking about what their signs would say, and we're making all these sketches. And then as we're planning this, we started sort of talking ourselves down. We're like, wait a minute, are we being sexist? We're like, are we just like you know, dumbing down women to that they're just talking uteruses and that's all that we are? And then so we just were like going round and round in circles about like, are we being sexist ourselves in trying to empower women and trying to like, you know, do the opposite of that? Elisa, what do you?
Yeah, so that was something I was thinking about too, because then I'm like, wait a minute, like you've seen my art, so I'm probably the wrong person to ask if this is like too edgy or too outrageous, you know what I mean? So I was like, well, if I was some other person, you know, what would I think of this? And then I was like, well, but I'm doing this project, and you know, Karina and I are doing this project, and you know, this is our expression, right? And also, I think there's something to be said about a little bit of attention grabbing humor, because, you know, it gets people to stop and look and think. And, you know, sometimes even if it's not positive, you know, just that strong reaction, it gets, you know, it gets people to think a little bit about why they're reacting that way, you know, and it brings attention to some very important issues.
So there was a few things that were important to us. We wanted it to be like somewhat humorous, and we wanted to have a focus on like women's health and anatomy and feminine empowerment, and also history. We wanted there to be like a great sense of diversity, and so then we also decided to bring Joanna into the group because Joanna has a good perspective on a lot of these issues. And then also because like, well, Elisa and I are both digital artists, and so we thought it would be good to bring another tech artist in, and so that was Joanna. So here is some of Joanna's work, and then here is Joanna at her MFA thesis with her VR project. So then there were three of us, and we started trying to decide what our uterus would look like. And so these are some of the uteruses that did not make the cut, and I think it's because they were a little scary, maybe. And but this is just some of the rough drafts. I actually early in the process I sent this picture of this uterus to Elisa, and I was like, look at the ovaries, like look at the fallopian tubes. It looks just like fingers. And so Elisa had already been drawing them like fingers anyway, but I mean, I think that this was a piece that really like inspired us, this image here.
Something I wanted to add about the one on the bottom, it had little horns. I was actually looking at some medieval depictions of female anatomy, and I don't know where they got this idea back then. I know there was a lot of just demonization of anything female, but like they would, in medieval anatomy illustrations, they often drew the uterus with like devil horns. So I thought that was interesting.
So then next we started like laying the groundwork for the humans that would also be in the protest. And this is one of the very early renditions of it. And we decided to scrap this particular rendition for a couple of reasons. A, because there wasn't any representation of women of color. And then, but also we did definitely want to include a man. We didn't want it to be all women protesting for women's rights, because we believe that women's rights are humans' rights. And so we definitely wanted to include both male and female protesters. So then this is just like a quick sketch up of us parting it out and getting it ready to be turned into puppets. So this is almost ready for print. And then a subtle detail here is we printed a version of the 19th Amendment on the lady's skirt to subtly just like pay homage to that. But then I think the main thing we decided is that we definitely wanted not only a woman of color to be included in the protest, but we kind of wanted her to be at the very center of it. And so it sort of evolved into that. Joanna, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, 2016 election has definitely been a wake-up call for a lot of people, including, for example, myself, in terms of
learning more, needing to learn more about the social movements here, how things such as rights came to be, what rights that might be in danger. And one of the more interesting things that I learned that I probably should have known but have not before is that a lot of protest movements started with Black women, and especially, and then were taken over by white women. So this inclusion seemed very important in a sense that all three of us are white women, and some diversity there.
Yeah, and then we also wanted to add, well, there's a little story behind the birds. We were originally going to add a little bit of an AR part of the process, and so the birds were going to be triggers for the AR. So we came up with these birds, and then here's the final product that we came up with. If you haven't seen it already, so it's an active protest with including 3 little uterus protesters living on their own. We call them sentient uteruses.
Humor is a really critical part of coping with complex issues and challenging issues too. And I think maybe a lot of us during the pandemic and during these protests are drawn to moments where we can find humor, and that releases us into a safer space while we're still working through those complicated issues. And the movement in the piece is very engaging. So when you walk in the galleries, you won't see it move until you get close enough. And then the figures and uteruses move.
Yeah, and so we did that intentionally so that the viewer would become a part of the protest, because you as the viewer are the one that activates the movement. You activate the protest. Yeah, and one more thing I'll say is that I actually was pregnant and during the whole time we were making this piece, and then when the pandemic hit and I was pregnant, it was like really hard for us to get together to get these pieces printed and put together and everything. And then we got together and installed this piece like 2 weeks after my little baby was born. So that was just like a really unique and feminine experience. So I thought it actually kind of fit well with the whole experience.
Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to all of the artists for inspiring us with your creative and collaborative processes. As we approach the election, we urge you to use your power to vote. Cultural anthropologist Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world." Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And statesman and civil rights leader John Lewis stated, "The vote is precious. It is the most powerful nonviolent tool we have in a democratic society, and we must use it." So thank you again for joining us. The exhibit will be up for just a few more weeks. You can get your free tickets at the Arvada Center website. Also, keep an eye out for our exhibit catalog. I'm just about finalizing it, and I'll have that link for purchasing the publication very soon, and we'll post it on social media as well as on the website. I'm very excited about that publication. It's hard to say goodbye to an exhibition that's such a large-scale, thoughtful, meaningful one. And so I really love that we can capture its memory in the form of this book, this catalog. So I hope you'll get to see again all the amazing work at the Arvada Center in person, because again, it's up for a few more weeks, and also in our publication. So thank you so much.